5 more minutes on your...
My next topic is custom functions. So I'd like to take about 10 more minutes on this and then maybe eat the time on that, if that's okay. 10 minutes? 20 minutes? I mean, I'll take as long as you guys want. It's not really up to you. If you want me to talk more about services and custom functions, I'm happy to. So two particular issues. Breakdown services, Dave Knight and Angel City brought me in on that particular project. They are a very old and established company that takes the scripts from the movie, people who are going to produce a movie. They break down the scripts into all different roles. They describe all different roles. They send that information out to the talent management and agents and so forth, who then go through their files and recommend to people and submit them for audition, and then they broker the auditions and all that stuff. And they've been doing this for like, I don't know, 50 years. They started off with a fleet of bicycles and motorcycles who actually couriered the stuff around LA. So they've been around for a while. So they came out, they're coming out with a new product that's FileMaker based that needs to communicate from the FileMaker client to the web service that has all, to a web interface of all the data that people can enter on the web and view on the web. So we need to build this hook between the two systems. So in a particular case, there was a change in project management several times during the project. There was different leadership in the IT group who had radically different perspectives on how they wanted to handle things. The specs were completely walked out in terms of what they wrote versus what they wanted. So we had to politely figure out how to solve that, and everything kept changing. What we needed, though, was a reliable and fast FileMaker Pro connection between the two systems, and an architecture that was supported. From my perspective, I had to build an architecture that Angel City could then use without having to call me all the time. Right? I wanted to build this thing and say, here you go, I'm done. So after experimenting, I decided to use SmartPill with the SOAP client PHP class so that we could handle the HTTPS connection, which was required, because they have a big security issue. People pay a lot of money to find out what movies are coming out and what type of roles are happening, so they have to keep the data secure. And what I chose to do is take the data from the remote system as raw XML and basically save it into a FileMaker Pro field. Since the web service, the guys at the far end, for very good reasons, did not want me making a request that said, here, give me a list of all these things. Just give it to me in one go. They're like, no, we don't want you sending a request that makes us send you 1,000 records at once. Because we have, 500 people using this thing constantly, or 1,000 people. So you can ask for one thing at a time. And I kind of fought them on that, and I lost. So, but I totally understood, because I have sat on that side of the table, so I totally understand their concerns about that. So what we ended up doing was to basically send a set of requests one after a while and aggregate all the data in FileMaker, and then just export that to a file on disk, and then use FileMaker's import record command to then bring in the XML. So I wrote it out as FMP XML result, already ready to go in, and we found that the performance was really fast for that, because we were able to do lots of 1-1-1-1s and then save it all out, pull it in, and it worked really well. And it also meant that as they changed the types of data that they were trying to send, I didn't really need to make a whole lot of changes to the FileMaker code. The whole architecture for the data exchange and the handshaking and all that, the security, all that was static. The only thing I had to change was the XSLT file that would reprocess the XML that they sent me back into the same XML that I wanted for FMP XML result. And they must have changed their spec 5 times. Right? So and I'm not talking simple changes like adding a field. It's like, oh, we're going to use Cold Fusion. No, we're going to use something. So radically different XML was coming back, but I was able, just by modifying the XSLT, to keep the mapping intact. And then I wrote a set of custom functions in FileMaker to assemble the appropriate PHP calls which were used within SmartPill, so that the folks at Angel City didn't need to know the details of how those were being constructed. They could just invoke the custom function, and it would assemble the appropriate strings to make the queries and perform the commands. So it's another way of isolating the complexity. Just so, since you guys are code people, you want to see some code. So, like here I have set a SOAP response, which is just a text field in FileMaker, to PHP execute of cPHP. This PHP execute, that's the function that SmartPill provides. It says execute some PHP, and here's my calculated field that constructs the particular PHP string that's going to be used. And after it's done, I calculate success to just get the first value that's in that response. So I by architectural design, chose to have the first value be like an error code, so that I could know, no matter what happened, I could find out within the FileMaker environment what's happening. So here, and then here, the cPHP in this case is, get talent from config, which is a custom function I wrote that just takes some values, and it ends up calculating something that looks like this. Okay. Now, since I built this, the folks in Angle City didn't need to know the details of this particularly. I mean, they could have gotten into it, but it isolated that complexity because all they had to do was know to use this. I don't know if you can read that, but this is a typical, like, what the raw XML coming back from the server looked like. It's your typical messy XML, and we translated that back. All right, now the second case I'm going to talk about is Personal Wine Curator. It's a FileMaker-based runtime app. It's been sold for a while now. That's, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 users of this thing, which manages people's wine collection. They can keep track of where their wines are located. They can keep track of when they should drink them, how much they're worth. They can catalog their tasting notes and so forth. And the project here was to build a web repository, an internet accessible repository for several purposes. One, they wanted people to be able to upload their wish lists and their current inventory so that they could get access to them from mobile devices, so they could look at what they wanted to buy or what they already have, so that when they're in the store they can, make decisions. And they also wanted to share the tasting notes associated with the wine, so that if we bought the same bottle of wine and I put some notes in and you put some notes in, we can maybe see each other's notes. So we wanted this little beginning of a social thing on there. So in this case, we had control over all the layers. Control over the client, control over the server, and so forth. We chose PHP because FileMaker provides some decent PHP support. We decided to just go with MySQL in the back end just because it's fairly widely usable. There are lots of people who know how to support it. In this case, we ran all kinds of hosting provider activations because we had started with a very inexpensive hosting provider and we got what we were not paying for. And we had made a decision to implement without plugins because we didn't want the technical support aspects associated with that because of the type of product that's being supported. So in this case, we used a REST-style query from FileMaker Pro directly to the PHP server that we're using. And we use the import record script step. So import records is very clever because you can put a URL as your, like, where is the file that I'm importing? You can use a URL for that. And if you create a REST call, which I'll show you in a minute, that has some of the parameters in it, you can get back FMP XML result data, which just imports. So it's a way of doing REST from within FileMaker client. And just like I showed you in the other project, I wrote a set of custom functions to isolate and centralize the code so that the developers of the package didn't need to worry too much about the specific details. So for example, here's what the REST request might look like, where it's going to some path, where their PHP is, and then we pass, A equals some value, and B equals another value, and C equals something, and so forth. And then the PHP knows how to interpret what those values are and do something and magically return FMP XML result data. And the trick is to return the same FMP XML result data, whether it's an error or data. So the import record works, so you have to have your fields line up because you're not discriminating between two different import orders. But if you do that, you get it with a very powerful and very lightweight interface between the systems. The same PHP was able to be leveraged to be used by the mobile devices just by reskinning it with different layers of CSS and a few other methods. And this gives us a pretty dynamic environment. So I really just sort of skimmed very quickly through all this. I realize it's a lot of information, detailed information to cover at 3:30 in the afternoon. But I hope I imparted that as a platform, FileMaker is very well positioned.